where would you feel like is natural for you to grab on this creature? And then he goes, well, here. And then we mark it with a Sharpie. Well, and then now sit up, and where would you grab? Okay, back here, we mark it with a Sharpie. And then we measure that, right? And then that then goes back into my ZBrush design, right? Of like, these are where the actor says he wants the grab points to be and how he would lay on the thing. And it's like, well, when he lays down, he needs somewhere to tuck his feet under, and there's nothing on the creature. So either we got to design that in the saddle, or we got to design it anatomically on the creature. So I ended up like putting these tiny little fins, and you'll miss them if you aren't paying attention. But if you'll see them, there's these little tiny dorsal fins on the back of the skim wing. That was so that the actor could have something to tuck his feet under when they're diving, right? So because Jim was like, well, if he doesn't have anything to tuck his feet under, based on that reference footage, we know that like once those G-forces hit, that character would get torn off the creature.
Please welcome Zachary Berger to this episode of the Learn Squared podcast. Zach is a concept artist who has worked across games and film, notably as the lead creature concept artist on the Avatar sequels. Let's jump in and discover how Zach found his way in his career while on a non-linear path, some of the scariest decisions he has had to make, swimming through imposter syndrome, and what his first day was like on Avatar, plus much more. Let's go. Cool, let's go. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Learn Squared podcast, and delighted to welcome on the amazing Zach Berger. Welcome, sir.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor. I know we've been touching base for a while trying to make this happen, so I'm glad we're able to finally do it.
Same. Let's just get the pleasantries out of the way. Huge fan of your work, and
likewise.
Not only just in terms of like what it is, but the solutions you come up with, and we'll definitely geek out about that before we get into it. But I guess 2 quick questions, if you wouldn't mind just giving a little intro to yourself. But then the immediate follow-up question to that is, obviously we're recording this, it's close to the end of February, so to me it's still the beginning of the year. It still feels like January the 1st. How is 2026 going for you?
So sort of ignoring the things going on in my country. It's I can't complain. My immediate sort of bubble of my life is going quite well. I have a lot to be thankful for, and live a very sort of privileged and lucky life. So, how about yourself?
Like I said, I still feel like it's the first day of the year. So, but I guess similar. Yeah, exactly. Oh, mine's always have. I've got a weird feeling of time. Like, obviously, like you got your quarters, right? Like Q1, Q2, Q3. Q1 feels like a month for me. Like 3 months or like 6 months feels like a couple of weeks. A lot of chaos, but in a weird way, like with the way the world is going and things in that industry, whether it's like just personal stuff, whether related to like industry and stuff or like life stuff, inspired like from a creative sense, but at the same time like worried and scared, obviously, with all the stuff that's going on as well. So
I understand.
It's just all of this stuff at one go. Like there's no, if this was Photoshop, for example, the saturation is 100% on every single thing. And there's no value separation. It's just all chaos.
I understand. I think I can relate. I know what you're saying.
But yeah, let's go back to almost the beginning. If you wouldn't mind letting people know who you are and what you do.
Oh yeah. Okay. So yeah, my name is Zach Berger. I am a creature designer, concept artist, working mostly in the film industry, a little bit in video games, freelance, just kind of bouncing around a bit. For the last quite a while, I've been on the Avatar sequels, so that's been keeping me busy for quite some time now, and was lucky enough to receive credit as lead creature designer for Avatar 2 and 3. So that's probably what I'm at this point most well known for, but I've done quite a bit of things and bounced around prior to that.
Avatar, I'm sure, will take up a nice segment or a big chunk of this episode. And I'd love to pick your brain specifically as someone who's a lead on that particular, I guess, you'd refer to as a show, but it is a phenomenon in terms of like what it is creatively, culturally, in terms of entertainment, especially for artists as well. But yeah, let's go back right back to the beginning. Like, was this a journey that you always wanted to take?
That's a good question. Yeah, so I guess I'll just jump into this. I grew up on an island in the Pacific.
Right.
It's a tiny Pacific island called Saipan. It's in the Mariana Islands. It's close to Guam.
Okay.
It's like well, in the UK you use miles, right? So it's yes, I think yes. About like I think it's roughly like 15 miles long and like 3 miles wide.
Really?
And that was where I grew up like my entire childhood.
Wow.
So there wasn't like a lot of access to art or art education, you know, but I was always really into movies and video games and just sort of like once I sort of it became aware that that's something that you could work in, I had sort of like a direction to follow, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. So it was like, had like a direction to point in, but not knowing where I was going to end up. And there was just sort of a discovery process of like learning about, well, first getting off the island and going to the mainland US. And I ended up at a small like game design school in Seattle. And it was just because I had sort of like researched and looked around for like, oh, this place will let you work in, you know, once you get out of here, you'll work in video games. And I was like, okay, that sounds cool. I want to do that. And I think when I applied for that school, they had 2 tracks and one was programming and the other one was art. And I was like, well, of those 2, I want to do art. Like I do not want to do like, you know, coding or anything. That's not my jam. But that school turned out to be not the greatest fit for me. And I remember going to, it was, I think it was a Massive Black workshop. I don't know if you're familiar back in the day, but yeah, I went to one of those and was just sort of overwhelmed and inspired in a good way, with all of the level of talent out there. And I was just sort of looking around at all of these talented people, and there were people getting portfolio reviews, and they were like sort of standing in line to like get their portfolio reviewed by a, you know, high level professional. And, you know, it was a lot of students and it was a lot of like aspiring professionals. And I remember seeing the same like group of kids, and they were all getting these really spectacular like reviews from the pros, right? Like, oh, your work is like at a professional level, like it's pretty, or you're close, or like it's really good. And they were all coming at that time from the same school. And it was Art Center College of Design in Pasadena. And I was like, well, I want to go there then. Like, what am I doing? You know, I'm sort of wasting my time up here and my, you know, tuition money. So just sort of reversed course and decided to apply to Art Center, and packed up all my crap and threw my cat in the car and drove down to Pasadena, and luckily got in, and you know, just sort of took a leap of faith at that point to sort of like, seems like there's good work coming out of there and they're doing something right, so I want to be there. And that was in hindsight a very good decision, because it sort of put me on the path to, you know, eventually end up as a concept artist in the video game industry, and then jumping into film. So yeah, but it was one of those things, I guess, to get back to your original question of like, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to work in that. Like, I want to be a part of that in some way. Like, it's so cool. It's so like inspiring, but it was just a learning process throughout that time of like going to the game design school, finding out that concept art was a thing. Like, I didn't know that was a thing. I just like, oh, I want to be like an animator, right? Like, right, you know, and just sort of seeing Pixar or whatever, right? Like, or just thinking that all those jobs are just animators, right? And then ending up at Art Center, and then getting introduced to all these like sort of working professionals there, and as instructors, and learning that even within concept art, there was like a range of things you could do. You could sort of specialize. And it was sort of towards the end of my time at Art Center that I was like, well, I want to do specifically creatures. But that was just through exposure of like meeting people who did only that and who were able to like sustain themselves and make a career out of it. That's the short version, I guess. at that point, towards the end of my art education at Art Center, I was really, first of all, very nervous to like get out of school and like have a job. And Art Center is not cheap, and I took on a lot of debt to go there. Another wonderful thing about the American educational system is that you gotta take out a bunch of loans to get a good education. And so I was like, oh, I got to pay this stuff off. And like that sort of deadline of like the loans hitting was impending. So I was really hitting the ground, like trying to get my work out there and like show my work to pros. And like, so I was going to all these conventions and like portfolio reviews outside of the school. Right. It was, sorry, I lost my train of thought. It was through that experience. Oh yeah, I remember now. It was through that experience. I had gone to several of those like portfolio reviews, and I think it was GDC one year. I like went, and I had been several years in a row, I think, as like a student, and like just, you know, I would show my work and then would get feedback, and you know, it's like, oh, you're not there yet, you know, or like work on this thing or improve this thing. And it was that sort of cycle of like hearing from pros sort of consistently on like things to improve sort of every year that I think was really helpful. And then one year at GDC, I showed my work to an art director at Sony Santa Monica, the studio that makes God of War. And he was like, oh, your work is like pretty cool. And, you know, basically like we're looking for an intern, and like, can you go show your work to our lead concept artist who happened to also teach at Art Center, but I had not taken his class. So I went and found him, and then that sort of turned into an internship at Sony, which sort of launched my that was my sort of foot in the door of the video game industry. And it was there for a couple years. And then after a couple years of that, I got then an opportunity just through like a contact I had made to like show my portfolio to a production designer that was working in doing a film project that was looking for specifically someone who was like very heavy ZBrush creature work. And so it was just, I had two-ish years under my belt at Sony and had sort of completely revamped my portfolio from my student work. And it was on the Sony, sorry if I'm bouncing around a little bit, but the Sony project was like it was a new IP that they were trying to launch. It ended up never seeing the light of day, but I was sort of lucky in that it was very sort of not super stylized work. Not, you know, it was like very sort of film adjacent type work. So I was doing a bunch of creatures that could, you know, sort of exist in a film. And so I had a bunch of work to show from that, obviously like sort of under the table, you know, not publicly, but it was enough to like, if I got it sort of, you know, in front of this production designer, that sort of got me the job. And that was my first film gig. And that sort of turned into a second and a third. And fast forward, I don't know how many years later. And here I am, you know, I found myself in a room with James Cameron. So it's been, you know, it's been a series of sort of very lucky events, but also just sort of when something's not working, I've noticed that I sort of take a leap of faith and just completely will decide to change directions in my life. And I've done that like now a couple times. So yeah, I don't know, long-winded answer. I hope if you want to pick apart any of that, I'm happy to.
Everything. There's so many things I want to pick apart. No, I think that's it's an amazing journey, and I think there's a lot of things you touched upon there that many people still experiencing, have experienced, and will continue to experience. Especially, I guess, maybe there's other ones, but there's normally two threads to someone's career. It's they figure out what they want to do, get qualified, whether that's self-taught or go get some education, and that sorts themselves out, and then they apply and they get hired. In other cases, I'm not going to relate to you on this one, where it's a bit of a more of a zigzag approach. Like you go from different places to different places, and you kind of answered a little bit there. The next question I was going to ask was, when you are in that situation where you are kind of like zigzagging and trying to find your path and find your way, and as you mentioned, like you are either making tweaks along the way or changing your perspective, or I guess even the trajectory a little bit along the way as well, what that approach is like. And for some, it can be purely out of like just panic and, okay, I need something, I'll just take something, and I'll take whatever comes to me. For others, it's strategic and like, no, I'm going to really just stick to my guns and I'll figure it out. And then it's kind of like in between. But you mentioned something very interesting there where you said like, you find a way, like you just kind of like re-strategize, realign, and just find a way and get that stuff sorted out. Was that always the case? Like, and do you feel like if that was, so if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
38.
Okay. So we're a similar age. So I totally get you when you said like concept art wasn't a thing, or it wasn't like a pathway that it is now. Like it's very pronounced and it's not easy to get in, but the pathway is very clear versus back then when it was a case of like, what do you want to do? But obviously you also mentioned, and I'll be bouncing around a lot too, as you'll probably notice as we go along. You mentioned obviously the element or the reality of getting into debt to get into school as well. Specifically on that, how much of the debt and knowing that, okay, it needs to be paid off, was a driver or an influence on the kind of moves you made?
Yeah. So the two questions are kind of related, I guess. Like, right. You described sort of two personalities of one person who's like, it's through fear, and the other person who's like, well, I'm just going to figure it out. Me recognizing that I've taken these big leaps and now I've figured it out and I'll be okay. That's all in hindsight. Got it. That's through going to therapy, right? Like, like understanding like, oh, I can trust myself. But no, at the time it was totally fear-based. It was like the debt was a great motivator to find work. Right. And I got very lucky that I landed at a, sort of a dream situation right out of the gate. And have continued to have very lucky breaks, with the projects that I've landed on. But, at a certain point, like, I think anybody and everybody, you gotta like just take the job that pays. And I've done plenty of those too. Like there's plenty of jobs that are not on my website or whatever, like my social media, that are like, just to pay the bills. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but I am a totally like severely anxious person. So it's a little bit of maybe I'm a little bit of a victim of sort of the American education system of just like, there's this sort of Stockholm syndrome of like, oh, you just got to go. It's part of the deal. You just got to go into a ton of debt and figure it out. And that was, it certainly motivated me, made me work pretty hard.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
No, yeah. Just the anxiety thing, I can 1,000,000% relate to you. For me, it's never gone away, but it's changed shape almost. Like I don't know if it's more manageable or I'm just more tolerant to it, but it's almost like not as crippling as it used to be.
Yeah.
Do you say that as like a throwaway comment, or was anxiety like a big deal for you? And maybe even still is as part of your like, I guess, experience as a human?
Oh, I mean, I think this is all stuff that I have discovered about myself, like more recently, like unpacking sort of myself and my past, and just putting in the work to discover myself. So yeah, it is something that I, in hindsight, have recognized that I have dealt with my whole life. And in some ways it's been in some ways it's a good thing, right? Like in some ways there's a a biological benefit to anxiety, right? Like it's a good motivator. It's a good, way to get me to like do things I don't want to do, or like, work that extra hard. It can also be really detrimental to your health, right? Long term, it can be a problem if you let it sort of consume you. So I think I recognize that it's a part of me and that it's gonna be there, and like, but I think I've gotten better at just sort of recognizing that, and like sort of what you're saying of like not reining it in, but just in the recognition, I'm able to like, okay, acknowledge it, know that it's there, and then go like, okay, this doesn't have to consume me, all day, every day. It can still help motivate, but I can still use it for good, and then sort of put a lid on it for the negative.
Yeah, no, I think that's very well put. It is like a volatile substance, I guess. Under controlled scenarios, yes, it could be like quite powerful and very usable. I guess like a blowtorch or like a welding torch or something. But then obviously, if the safety's off and some things burst, then it's going to be a bit chaotic and quite crazy. But like, with that said, do you find that ever bleeding into your creative process or even your art? Or is that almost like the complete antidote to, is that almost like an anxiety-free zone?
The actual art making itself? Yeah, I don't know if it's, I think art in a lot of ways is when I'm in the zone and undistracted, and like you just do hit that sort of flow state. And I think it's quite meditative for me. So it's almost an antidote to it in a lot of ways, the actual art making process itself. So, and that's another thing that I've sort of recognized, in my later in life about, some people are very good about meditating every day, and that's not something I've been able to pick up yet. But I do think that sort of scratches that itch to some degree. Like that, if you hit a flow state sort of every day, I think it can access, a similar part of the, have the similar benefits to meditation. I also try and find time to work out consistently and, all that stuff. I think that's the answer to your question. In terms of like my behavior in my professional life, I would say, so not the art making process, but the process of delivering for clients by making art. I would say the anxiety has been, again, just like in some ways like part of my success, and I have to acknowledge that. I think the reason that I have stuck around, for example, so long on Avatar, maybe because I just like go like, oh, I'm so nervous that I gotta like over deliver kind of thing, and exceed expectations. I think that in some ways it's been a good thing as long as it's, monitored and kept at a healthy sort of amount, I guess.
Amazing. I think that's a powerful thing to share and also to recognize. Especially
not exactly where I expected the conversation to go, but
me neither.
An open book.
But like a lot of I guess people starting out or still early in their journey, like they're probably thinking about, okay, what's it like getting a job, being on a big project? Like, how do you have to be? And there's always those questions, and I'm sure you can go back to your early journey as well, where you're asking those questions of yourself as well. Like, what kind of person do I have to be like, or what skills do I need to add that I don't have already that will enable me to do the job? And then I guess the anxiety side of things, or like hiding that or feeling like you can't operate under that, is probably something that people think a lot, or maybe overthink and think that, okay, I need to either eliminate that or I will never be able to thrive in that scenario. Yeah, as you've just mentioned, it's almost not like a secret weapon, but it's something that you can clearly use to your advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I guess an example that comes to mind is, so like first week I started on Avatar 2, I had sort of gotten the call and was really excited. And I'm at this point still in my 20s. And, I show up and I think it's like first couple days, I don't remember which day 1 or 2 or 3, but something like that. I'm like in the room with James Cameron, and he's like, and my boss, Dylan Cole, who's one of the 2 production designers on the project, he's like, yeah, so we need you to design a Pandoran great white shark for James Cameron, and we have a meeting like later this week, like go. and so yeah, that initial shock there was like very anxiety inducing. But it was, and because I have such a respect for the work that was done on the first film and like the artists that contributed to that, and to me they're like, I consider them some of the top of the field. Wayne Barlow was a creature designer on the first movie, and Neville Page and Yuri Bartoli, and their work, I aspired to do work that good, and so suddenly you're put in that position of like, okay, now it's sink or swim, like go design this, go design a brand new creature for the Avatar universe, and we have a meeting with James Cameron later in the week. It was, I think what I have recognized over the course of that, and not in just that initial meeting, but just like consistently doing that now for years, of just like, there was a long time where I had like this sort of pretty bad case of imposter syndrome of like, it's surely like somebody more talented, more qualified, more senior than me that should be in this position. And like, this is going to go away from me at any time. And so I think the way that I mentally got around that was just fake it till you make it. Like, right. Just sort of like acting like, well, somebody who was a really talented creature designer, senior level creature designer, designing for James Cameron, this is how they would act. Like, and I will like emulate that person, that fictitious person. And that's worked for me, until I feel like I am starting to grow into the, like, I've gotten more comfortable in the role and grown into like, this is okay. At some point, it sort of years into the process, it hit me of like, okay, well, I guess this is not going away, and they like my work and they keep me around, and like, so I must be doing something that they appreciate. So at some point that did like not totally go away, but it subsided. It wasn't as bad as in my, early days in my 20s. So, and then even when, Dylan Cole, again, or one of there's 2 production designers on the Avatar sequels, Dylan Cole and Ben Proctor, and Ben handles all the hard surface stuff, all the RDA Earth stuff, and then Dylan handles all the organic Na'vi Pandora creature stuff. And Dylan, I think, has been over time sort of pushing me, giving me some encouragement to like sort of grow my role a little bit. And like I've been lucky enough to like help oversee some of the creature designs on the video game stuff, or like other sort of projects that they have in the pipe, and sort of help art direct that stuff, or I don't know if I can use the term art direct, but visually consult, offer art direction, and that I think was another example of like, this feels like this belongs to somebody else more qualified. That was what was going through my head. And it was just like, I had to trick myself into like, well, act like you think a art director would act in this position. And when I'm in the meeting with these other teams, we were working with the Ubisoft Massive team. I'm offering art direction to their, very expensive game. And they are taking it, right? Like, at a certain point, it was just like, okay, well, it just sort of fake it till you make it. Just like act like who you think that person would be. And then at some point I felt like I sort of became that person, as I got more comfortable.
Interesting. Do you feel like the role that you have now and what you are as a creative and an artist, and as a person too, are you in your pocket? Like, is this your, I guess you could say, like, final form?
That's a good question. I don't know what's next for me. Like after, at some point, this project will end, and like I'll move on to something else, and I don't know what that is. If you asked me, would you be happy doing this for the foreseeable future? The answer would be yes. Like right. I don't need much more than this to be like sort of creatively fulfilled. This is sort of I set a goal to sort of have a job like this, and I'm very fortunate that I landed it, so I am not eager to find the next thing at this point. At some point that may be beyond my control, but for now I'm not looking. I hope that answers the question.
No, for sure. What about in terms of like from the, I guess, technical side, like specifically in creature design, all the kind of roles or the hats that you've had to wear? As you just mentioned, some of those were not forced upon you, but some of those that you put in those positions and like, can you fulfill this kind of role? And you have. Have you embraced those kind of roles now? Like, do you feel like, okay, this is definitely my groove, or do some of them still feel a little bit not almost like in your comfort zone?
No, I think at this point I'm pretty like comfortable offering sort of, if it's art direction for creatures in the Avatar universe, I am like pretty comfortable doing that now. Like, and I am like, I guess at this point I'm sort of a subject matter expert on that particular little niche, right? Like there's a couple of us, like certainly Dylan is one of those, and Jim Cameron is, of course, has the final say. But it was actually, I got to work with our producer John Landau, who is he unfortunately passed away regrettably pretty recently, but he was the executive producer of the Avatar projects, and he was also one that was sort of like, I think, very politely sort of nudging me and sort of giving me the push I needed to sort of like grow into this role, and encouraging me to like take on more of these responsibilities. So I think when you look around and you're like, okay, well, Dylan seems to believe in me and John Landau seems to believe in me, and like, so I must be doing something that they're like appreciating, that they want me to keep doing. So I think at a certain point that that anxiety of like not being good enough has subsided to some extent. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
No, for sure. So that moment when you got the call and you're told to design that first thing, what would you say, and list as many as you want, or none at all, if there aren't any, are the most defining moments, or I guess lessons or milestones in your career before that kind of put you in that seat, that got you there?
Okay, that's a good question. Well, one of them was certainly that like interaction with that Sony art director that like got me that first game gig, and it was like not just a game gig, but at this like super prestigious, like top of the industry studio that was like sort of being surrounded by these people that are, best in the business, and just like breathing that in every day, There's a lot I think that you can learn in school for sure, and I had a great education, but there's a lot that's like you learn just sort of through osmosis, being in like an environment like that. And it's interesting. I feel like I've lost some of that in the post-pandemic era of like a little bit more work from home. There's something magical about being in that, sort of like you go into a studio and everybody there is like the top of their game, and you can just sort of look over anybody's shoulder and go like, okay, well, you're like one of the best at this. Show me what you're doing. And there's so much to that, right? And so I would encourage people who are towards the beginning of their career or aspiring or starting out, like, if you can swing something like that, I think there's a tremendous amount of benefit to like even taking a pay cut to like go work somewhere in-house. Because I think there's just so much that can be learned on the job. Another big defining thing was, so I sort of glossed over this, but I had been at Sony Santa Monica for a couple years. We were on this new IP project. I got that opportunity to go into film. I showed my work to that production designer, and I sort of like jumped over to film. And I remember having conversations with my sort of leads at Sony. Were like, why are you leaving? This is such a good opportunity for you. Like, why would you do this? Right. And I was like, well, I have to, like, working in film has been a dream of mine. And like, these opportunities don't always present themselves. And it's sort of just like, it's one of those things where you just got to leap. You got to take the leap of faith. Right. And maybe this will be a bad decision. And then it was shortly after I left Sony, I think within a month, roughly, something like that, the Sony sort of like corporate people above the people in the studio, they killed the project. So they came in and they laid off like the entire team that I had been a part of. And there had been people that had been working there, I think, like pretty much their whole careers. Like they had never worked anywhere else. You know, they had sort of like gotten there out of their, you know, at the start of their career, out of school or whatever. And then they're happy there. And so they just stayed there. Right. And then fast forward however many years or decades, and then suddenly you're let go and you're looking around going like, what do I do now? And so in a way that was a really excellent lesson for me to learn that early on in my career of like, even though I was really liked that place and like could have been easily been one of those people that was like, oh, I'm a lifer here. It was a good lesson to learn. Like, don't get too comfortable anywhere, even in your sort of like dream scenario of like always sort of keep one ear to the ground and have a plan B sort of in the can, you know, waiting to go. So that was another sort of very formative, like it was almost traumatic. I didn't even experience it myself, but I had a lot of peers and friends that did, but just sort of, I dodged it just barely, but it was a good lesson to learn at the time. And then that first film project, so how film works, at least in Los Angeles, is you sort of you're freelance, right? And you sort of jump from gig to gig. And some of these projects can last months. You know, like a good gig is like 6 months. You know, I've had some that were like prior to Avatar that were like a year, which was considered like excellent, right? But some of them are weeks, right? And so you get to charge a little bit more because, you know, you're freelance and you don't know where your next gig is going to be or when. But there's that uncertainty, right? And so I was on that first film gig, and I think within a few weeks, they're like, well, maybe this show is going down. Like that's sort of the term they use. Like it's right. Like, we're not sure that the studio wants to make this. And then we had the director leave the project, and they're like, oh, this thing's going down. And I'm sitting in a room with all these other film guys, and they've all got these, you know, they're a lot more senior than me. They've all got these, you know, they've got a list of contacts to call to, like, they're all on the phone, like calling around, like going like, okay, well, what's next? Right. And I've just gotten into this industry. And so that was scary. And that show ended up going sort of up and down for several weeks. It was like, I was like lucky enough to get into there's a film union in LA for concept artists. And so by the union rules, they have to give you like I think it's like 2 days notice to like lay you off. So if they want to let go of the art department on a Friday, they got to tell you on Wednesday, like, okay, we're closing the doors Friday or whatever. Right. So that's the rule. So they would come in every like 2 or 3 days and go like, okay, on a Monday, they'd go like, okay, pack your stuff, be ready to leave on Wednesday. And then on Wednesday, they'd be like, okay, keep your stuff and be ready to leave on Friday. And then, you know, and they did that for several weeks. And it was just so anxiety inducing. And I'm going like, I don't know what's next. I left a good thing, right? Like this was before the layoffs at Sony. And I was like, I had this great game gig, and I took this film gig, and I don't know if this product's ever going to come out. And so that was very formative, sort of simultaneously. Right. And lucky enough, that project just, they even though they lost the director, I think the studio liked it enough that they kept the art department going, kept the production designer, and they found a different director who had a totally different vision. But they sustained us long enough to sort of like keep the project going. And so luckily I did not get let go, and I got to work on it long enough to sort of like grow my contacts in that industry, meet more people, and also just work with that group of people long enough that they felt comfortable sort of recommending me for the next thing, instead of just like a few days or weeks. So that was also just a very formative thing. And then I guess the final story to answer this question is another example of like when I was, I think still in school, of like just showing my work every opportunity I could, going to as many conventions or like portfolio reviews as I could. I showed my work I went to Comic-Con, and I got a portfolio review from Konstantin Sakaris, who's a big deal creature designer who I really looked up to. He was there, like he had just published a book and he was like promoting it, and he was like looking through my work and gave me like a really nice review, and was like, just sort of a nod of like, oh, I feel like we're going to be working together someday. And then fast forward, I don't know, a decade plus later, whatever it was. And then I'm sitting in the room on Avatar with him, and we're like colleagues. So that was cool. And just like learning the lesson of like, Konstantin has this reputation of being such a good person and like so easy to work with, and like of course his work is like is great, and like that's I think a given at that level of like you have to have spectacular work, but he's also like really easy to work with and really like fun to be around, and like when you're stuck in a room with him and it's late, he's like one of those people that is not bringing the mood down, he's bringing it up, right? And and learning that lesson, I think, of just like these soft skills of like that are beyond just the portfolio, right? Of that make you like an even more sort of appealing candidate for a job.
Amazing. Yeah. Regarding your I guess the portfolio journey and showing your work around, how did you feel about your work when you were asking for feedback? And it's a bit of a loaded question because you hear a lot of artists, again, it's another one of those, like there's two sides. Some are very paranoid and insecure. I guess every artist is insecure to a certain degree about their work. They're like, there's no point in me showing this because I already know it's shit and they're going to say it's shit, so I'll just tell myself it's shit and that's that. Then there's others who are like proud of what they have and they want to kind of, not, I guess, get validation, but they want to see, does my pride match versus someone professional? What was your relationship with your work at that time when you were showing off your portfolio?
Oh man, that's at Art Center at the time I attended, I don't know what it's like now, but I was like in this sort of one of these sort of inaugural classes of like entertainment, what they call entertainment design, which was like a program designed to put people into concept art. And I was like a little bit after the crew that like made that Skillful Huntsman book, but it was like before, it was like, I think I got in at like a good time of like, they were just starting this program, but like I was in, oh, sorry, my camera is like flipping out.
No, it's okay. It's so good.
I was in class at the time. Like I had classes with John Park, right? Like I had classes with like, just like people who were so much better than me at the time. Right. Like, and so that was quite humbling, I think. So I had like, I think the reason that I wanted to go to Art Center was like, oh, I just want to be somewhere where the median portfolio is good enough. Like once I get out, I know I'm going to be at a professional level. I don't have to be the best.
Right.
And because there were like just prodigy level kids there, like there were kids that were so talented. And so in some ways that was good to be surrounded by that. Like you learn from them and you're inspired by them. But in some ways it's like, it's hard on your mental health at that stage in your journey, right? Like your development, to go like, wow, I'm never like, this person is so much further than me. and what am I even doing here? And but it is funny, like after a point, like fast forwarding, like once you're all pros and you've been working for a little while, it all kind of evens out. Like it's I think I had maybe a little bit of an unhealthy like outlook to some of that, like in school, and then after a while it's just like all of those people are my friends, and like it's I think it becomes more like, are you a good fit for this particular project, or are you easy to work with? And like I said, like everybody's good at a certain level, like everybody's really talented. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but there was another anecdote I guess I'll have of like, it was again in that era where I was just showing my work around, and I was like, I could feel I was sort of on the cusp of like, okay, my work is not quite at a professional level, but I'm close. You can sort of get this through the like constant feedback from pros, if they're being honest, right? And I remember I went to a signing of a bunch of the Marvel VizDev guys. They were signing one of the art books, like one of the first Marvel movies. I can't remember which one, that was like, before there were 30 of them or whatever. And that team was just like, oh man, that's like the best team in the industry. I just like everything they do is so amazing, like totally like aspire to that quality of work. And so I was like, I want to show my work to them. So it was like, I think they were there intending to sign their books, their art books. And then I was like, hey, can you look at my work? And so I got a portfolio review, and I honestly can't remember who told me this, but it was one of the Marvel guys. And they were looking through my work, and they're like, could see, it was like a printed portfolio, right? Like actual like pages. And they could see my my stuff, and they're like, wow, it's you really like creatures, huh? Like, and I was like, yeah, like I really, and he's like, and your creature, they're saying this, like your creature work is actually pretty good, like and I was like asking for advice, and they're like, well, I want you to think about how many films a year come out that have creatures in them. And then now I want you to think about how many films a year come out that have sets in them. Right. And it's like every film has sets and not every film has creatures. Yes. So the advice, it was like it stuck with me. The advice was sort of a way of getting me to think about of like, okay, like I am sort of narrowing my perspective clients, I have this thing that I want to do that's sort of my North Star, that I must do this, at some point before I die. I must design creatures for a cool project. But I may be sort of like, at this stage in my career, I may be sort of limiting myself a little bit by focusing too heavily on this one thing. And so it was a good lesson. And at Art Center, there was a very heavy sort of like industrial, the entertainment design program was sort of born out of industrial design. So there were a lot of the teachers were like industrial design focused. Not my cup of tea. Like I am not a like hardcore perspective drawing like person. That stuff was always sort of, came harder to me than to some, but it was good to be exposed to that and to be good enough at that, right? To get good enough at that and to learn from those people. And so I sort of like, and I've heard different advice when I talk to aspiring professionals or students. There's people that have sort of conflicting advice. One set of advice is like sharpen one knife, like get so good at one thing. In my case, like creatures, that you're like undeniably good, right? And you're gonna get hired for that one thing, and ignore everything else because it's a waste of time and you only have so many hours in the day. So you just get so good at this one thing that like you're gonna get the call for that thing. And then, but my tactic after that sort of feedback was, and the sort of exposure that I had to sort of a wide range of stuff at Art Center, was to have the one thing that I'm obviously like making clear in my portfolio that this is what I aspire to do. This is what I feel most confident in, but be good enough at everything else. And so cast a little bit of a wider net of like, have the one sort of forte, like the one thing that sort of peaks above everything, but everything is at least like okay professional level of like, if you need, you'll hire me to do creatures, but if you need me to do a set, I can do it. If you need me to do a prop or a costume or a vehicle, I won't be as good at doing vehicles as Fausto De Martini, who is our hard surface vehicle guy on Avatar. Like he's spectacular at that, right? But I can do it. If a production designer asks me to do it, I don't say no. And I think that has been a little bit of a, for me at least, that has been a little bit of a, it's certainly helped me quite a bit, I would say, early on in my career of like, I got hired onto, here's a good example. I got hired onto Kong Skull Island the director really liked my creature work, wanted me to help out with the creatures.
Yeah.
Okay. I get hired. They bring on me. They bring on Carlos Fuente. They bring on Simon Lee and a couple other really spectacular creature designers. Like those Simon Lee and Carlos are like so good at that stuff, right? And that is all that they do. And they have sharpened that one knife. They're undeniably good, and they were better than me by far at creature design. But I was able to hang with them with the creature design stuff. I was able to get a few things in, and like they were much more my senior, they got a lot more in, but like I got some wins, you know, on that project. I got some designs approved. And then all the creatures were designed and they let those guys go. Right. But I was sitting there in the art department and the production designer comes over and says, "Can you do some sets?" You know, we have a whole bunch of more work to do that is not creature work. And my answer was yes. And so I was already sitting there, and that allowed me to stay on the project like a lot longer. And at that early phase in my career, that allowed me to meet more people. It allowed me to sort of grow my contact lists, impress, you know, that production designer or, you know, this or that, you know, supervising art director or whatever. And then those people become contacts that then refer me to other jobs or call me back. So I am now luckily at a fortunate stage in my career where I can sort of be choosy about what jobs I say yes to. And so I'm like trying to choose more creature focused work because that's what I want to do. But at that phase, I think it actually really benefited me to have that little bit of a wider net. And again, I was not as good as somebody else who was really focused on that thing, but I was good enough, right? Yeah. So I don't know if that
amazing
is helpful.
No, for sure. One of my follow-up questions, you already answered it anyway. So excellent. Quick one on that, and then before I get to the next question, is in that scenario, because you mentioned a few cases there where you either, whether it was at school or whether it was on a job, people that initially you felt that were either like were quote unquote better than you, or at least had more mileage or more medals, for example. How did you find that? Like, was it something that you enjoyed, like you almost embraced, like thinking, wow, I'm with these cool dudes, I'm going to learn so much? Or did it kind of give you that kind of like intimidating kind of feel, thinking like, okay, how do I keep up with these guys?
Bit of both, if I'm being honest. I think like I was really inspired by those guys, and but I think in hindsight, I sort of regret the sort of maybe the competitiveness that I think myself, and certainly I wasn't the only one, like there was a little bit of, I think, an unhealthy competitiveness in some instances that I think was not beneficial to us, because we're all friends now, like I said, and like everybody's good and everybody's doing fine. So yeah, I think that in hindsight, I would have done it differently. I would have been even more on the end of like, well, let me just learn from these people, right? Because I feel like that's where I am now, like professionally, like it's like I'm in a fortunate circumstance where I continue to be surrounded by like just really spectacular artists that are really good at their thing. And I would rather learn from them rather than like compete with them, I guess, if that makes sense. I'd rather have like a healthy sort of relationship. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
Oh, for sure. So you mentioned there when you got some feedback, like it was mentioned to you that you like creatures. Was that by design, or was that purely, again, because you liked them, you had a lot of them? Like, when did you realize that, hey, I'm a creature guy?
Yeah, so there's a school that I took a class at, not at Art Center, um, that I'll give a shout out to. It's called Concept Design Academy in Pasadena. A little just sort of like a la carte, art school, like entertainment sort of focused. They do a lot of like they have a lot of classes in concept art and storyboarding and that kind of thing. The instructor or the person that runs it is Kevin Chen, who's like an excellent sort of character designer and figure artist. And I took a class there, and it was with Jared Marantz, who was at the time and still is like a top level creature designer. And I think it was like getting exposure to that of like, oh, this guy just like does this thing. And I didn't even know that was possible, right? Of like, oh, you can focus, you can get that narrow in your focus. And he's able to pay his bills and do quite well and work on these cool big projects. And so I was like, well, if I'm going to choose, I want to do that. It's funny because initially I thought I wanted to do more character design, more like people and costume stuff. And I do a bit of that still too, but I didn't even know that you could focus on creatures. So I think it was like once that clicked that is something you can do, that's like, oh yeah, I'd rather do that. So it was roughly around then, I think. And it was being exposed to him and like a couple other people. Neville Page, I think at the time, I hadn't met him. He had taught at Art Center, but I missed him by like I think like a few months. I think we didn't quite overlap, but I think at the time he had started on the first Avatar, and just hearing about him and it's like, oh man, that's so cool. And I look up to those same guys, Carlos Huante and Simon Lee and Wayne Barlow and Crash McCreary, and there were some examples already of people who had done it, I think, and just being exposed to that. Because like I said, prior to that, like I didn't know even concept art was a thing. And, once I got into like knowing like, okay, I want to do concept art, I didn't know that you could sort of focus like that. So it was just more information was empowering.
Did you have like a fascination with, I guess, creatures growing up or as a subject matter? For example, I specialize, well, I'm trying to diversify now. Mainly vehicles, mainly like sci-fi, futuristic spaceships and what have you. But I remember like at the age of 10, I just wanted to be a car designer. And that's where mine kind of like thing stemmed from. And it was just, it's just kind of like mutated from there. Was it similar for yourself?
Yeah, I think so. In hindsight, it's interesting. It's funny. I think so people always ask me like, what's the like, what were you inspired by? Was it Star Wars? And, it's like, cause everyone's answer is Star Wars. Right. And, and I was like, well, Star Wars, I don't think I was quite old enough to be like, there's people just a little bit like more my senior that are like, oh yeah, they grew up with Star Wars. That was their like thing that inspired them to like do this. For me, it was Jurassic Park, the first one, and it was just, I think that just the timing of that, it came out at the right time of like my brain still forming and just like seeing that movie in the theater and like just my mind being blown and like I don't know if you've watched that movie recently, but like it still holds up quite well, like the effects still hold up, and so I feel like it looked quite good for its time. And it was just, those dinosaurs, they felt real to me. And it was like knowing that at a certain point, like, oh, like somebody made those, like somebody, like you can work on that. Like you can do something like that. It was that. And then I have this like core memory of like, my mom and my brother left town for like a long weekend or something. Like they went and did a trip. But just the two of them. So I was at home with dad, right? And so we got to like, dad was like, oh, we're going to like get pizza every night and rent all the movies that mom won't let us watch, won't let you watch.
Yeah.
So it was like that weekend or whatever it was. I think I watched Alien and Aliens.
Okay.
like, and I don't remember how old I was, but not old enough to be seeing that. But it was just like, and I watched a couple other scary movies that were like not as good, but I can't remember what they were. But those two specifically was like, oh my goodness, like that is like just the, seeing those are both, in my opinion, like masterpieces. Mm-hmm. One of them is a James Cameron movie. Yeah. And seeing the creatures in that, was just so inspiring. And I think at the time, all I was drawing was like velociraptors and aliens,
Wow.
Xenomorphs. And so I think those were sort of like, in hindsight now, like sort of unpacking my past. I think those were very formative things in my development. And then also I've always been inspired by animals. I've always had an affinity towards them. My mom is, a biologist. She went to school for that kind of thing. She's
cool.
So, and sort of growing up in the tropics, and we had tropical beaches and oh, I got a cat up here. Great snorkeling and coral reefs and stuff. So I was like exposed to a lot of wildlife and stuff just growing up. So I think that stuff's always inspired me, even when I was quite young.
And do you find like, especially the stuff in your youth, do you feel that still kind of feeds into your design and creative process, especially with creatures?
It is funny, yeah. Designing alien fish for an alien tropical reef on Avatar 2, I think I did have a little bit of a like leg up on maybe some of the other designers of like, okay, I've actually like experienced this firsthand. Like it's very much a part of my, my core sort of sense of self, right? Of like, I know these, at least the reference animals.
Yeah.
So I know what this feels like. And so I do think it's got to have influenced me for sure. I mean, I can't point to like something specific, but I'm sure it's swimming around up there in my head.
So going back to that first week on Avatar, and you've been given, I guess, the brief, like we got to meet with James Cameron. How did that meeting go?
So lucky for me, that first meeting was just Jim sort of giving me a download of like, this is what I want. And like, cause that first round of stuff I did was garbage. Like it was totally off the, like, I'm fortunate that
Are you exaggerating sort of with that, or was it legit garbage?
In my opinion, it was not my best work. And it was partially just the anxiety and just like the intimidation factor, and also not knowing the art direction yet. Like it's something that like, it was interesting. Like they had done all this work on the first film. There was a very clear sort of design direction to like the Na'vi sort of level of technology, the way they do their architecture. There was clear design direction to, or art direction to the creatures and their biology, but none of it had sort of been written down. There was no like design Bible for this stuff. So it was all sort of in, and I think that's why they brought Dylan and Ben back, because they knew a lot of that stuff. They were subject matter experts. But a lot of it's in Jim's head. And so he sort of has to give you his spiel of like, this is what this creature is. So, and it is funny after that. So again, fast forward quite a bit, and I'm working with like some of our franchise partners, such as the like Ubisoft massive team and like some of our other like partners that are doing stuff in the Avatar universe. And they're going like, how do I design a creature for Avatar? Like, what's the secret? And I go like, well, we don't have any of this written down. So I actually had to I worked with one of our like internal franchise people, and we like came up with like a design Bible of like, here's some rules of designing creatures for the Avatar, universe. Cause they needed help, right? They're just like, there is a balance of like, it's got to feel like something that, Jim's approach is always like, it's got to feel like you're going to an alien planet and watching like a nature documentary, right? They can't feel like monsters, it's a very different sort of, art direction than say like the Skull Island, King Kong, Godzilla stuff, right? Like, those are monsters, right? These are sort of like animals.
Yes.
And so there's a very fine line there that a lot of our franchise partners, when we first interact with them, they're like still learning that, and we have to help them.
Interesting.
We try and design things where it's like the decisions on the design are not arbitrary, right? This thing doesn't have teeth just because it's got teeth, right? Like there's got to be some biological explanation, hopefully, for that decision. Even if it's made up rules of like, this is how it exists on the ecosystem of Pandora, which isn't a place that actually exists, but like you want to at least have thought through it enough that you hopefully like the audience can feel that sort of like design, that sense of like design rationalization. That we like to say that there's like it's science fiction with a capital S science, that is the sort of design ethos of the project.
Oh, I think you guys absolutely nailed that for sure. Like even with the first one and the subsequent one since, that's always been my kind of like takeaway with the way the world has been fleshed out. Like, yes, it's sci-fi. Yes, it's on the alien planet. It's got aliens, all that kind of good stuff. But it always feels grounded, and the nature documentary explanation is like it's a perfect fit. I mean, it looks so good. Like you can just freeze frame everything. Even every time I watch these, especially the latest two, I walk out and I think I can't believe that was pretty much all CGI. Obviously, that's like how it's always kind of like summed up. That's just basically the tool that rendered it out. But obviously, there's a lot of thought that goes into this. But nevertheless, like that wasn't a practical effect. That was all done on computer. And I guess like as
that's
millennials,
not entirely true. That's actually not entirely true. That there's a sorry to cut you off, but like we've been trying, I think, to go out of our way, especially on this one, to explain a bit more of our process of like when there is an actor writing a creature, in my case, right? Like we build a physical, like sort of like we call it a buck. It's sort of like a mechanical bull.
Yes.
Right. Like a physical manifestation of that in the real world to scale to the actor of that creature. And so the actor has the performance capture suit on and they're grabbing onto the point of the creature exactly where that character would grab on. So all of that data is their actual performance. Right. And, things like, Dylan and some of his crew, they designed that big airship in the third movie, the gondola that the Wind Traders have, right? That's hanging under the Medusoids, the giant sort of jellyfish creatures. They had to go to like a level of scrutiny. Like they designed the whole thing and then they show it to Jim, and then Jim goes like, well, how do you steer it? Like how does it actually function? And then so Dylan and Jonathan Bach and I think a couple other artists, they had to actually like come up with a design Bible of like, okay, here's how all of those like, different ropes on the thing like interconnect. And like, if you pull this specific rope, then the ship is going to turn this way. Right. Mm. And they went into that level of scrutiny so that it could, when they built like a, what we call like sort of like a proxy version of it on the stage for the performance capture stage, it doesn't look like it's not fleshed out. It doesn't have the finish of like all the weaving and stuff, but it's like the things are at the right heights. They use like sort of boxes and stuff to like resemble the set. So the actors can actually like get up on the set and like, if there's a step here, there's an actual step on the set. Right. Uh-huh. And then so that they can then inform the acting troupe, like pull this rope in this scene. When the thing has to bank right, you got to pull this specific rope because that's where it is in the design. And so I think there's like I agree with you that my brain goes like I can't believe that was all fake in some ways, but in some ways it wasn't, because like when you see that Jim has been saying like when Sigourney Weaver doesn't come in and then like go into a sound booth and then record her lines for like a couple days like you would on like like an animated movie, right? Like, and then somebody else goes and animates it.
Yes.
Sigourney Weaver is actually on a stage giving a performance. It's her acting. And then they're like capturing all of that, including her face. Right. And so like her face is translated onto her Na'vi character's face. And so it's actually like the analogy we're trying to use more of is like, it's like digital makeup as opposed to like an animated film. Right. And I think there's like a big misconception. Like I saw online, like our costume designer, oh, my cat is doing naughty things. Our costume designer, like, she got nominated, great for her, for the Academy Awards this year for the costume designs. And I saw all these people online going like, how did they nominate Avatar for costume design? Those weren't real costumes. It's like, no, they were. They're physically built. They physically built all of those costumes. There are physical costumes of all of everything the Na'vi wear. And I think Weta Workshop, they built all of those down in New Zealand. They like weave all that stuff. They like find shells and stuff and or manufacture it. Mm-hmm. And then those get sometimes scanned and used as reference for the CG costumes, or actually like scanned and like they use it as a starting point to actually build the CG costumes. So yeah, there is just that level of scrutiny that level of design sort of detail that I think is why the films look so good. Part of why. I mean, obviously, not to take anything away from the visual effects team, who does it like obviously like best in the world. Yeah, I hope that more people watch some of the behind the scenes stuff, because there's so much that goes into it.
And yeah, I should have explained. Like, I have seen like the behind the scenes stuff as well. So, by the way, behind the scenes stuff is probably
sorry if that came across as
no. It's so good. It's so good, and I think it's good for the audience to understand as well, because yeah, I think a lot of it is, especially in pop culture, like Avatar, seen as the green screen film almost. Like it's just everything is all like CGI, it's rendered, and everyone's running around with the dots on their faces and what have you. But like you said, there's a lot of stuff that even more so than some films that are not purely green screen, but they have, like you said, a lot of the practical elements. Like, so as someone behind the scenes, how was the balance of like the CG side of things influenced, or how did that influence the practical stuff that you saw? Like, did it feel like a nice balance between the practical side of filmmaking versus how it was going to look in the final, I guess, final result, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that level of like, it is the practical stuff that I think that we go into that level of like practical build of stuff that elevates the design so much, that makes them feel so real, right? So for example, I designed the skim wing, which is this creature right here on the big sort of flying fish creature. Like, Jim had taken a group of the sort of the key cast and stuff, and like some of the like leads of like the stunt team and stuff, to, I think it was to the Bahamas, to like basically as like a research, mission before they had started the performance capture. And they were like, we had like a rough design of the skim wing, and he kind of knew what he wanted it to do. It was based on a flying fish. He knows he wants it to like, someone's got to ride it. He knows that he wants it to sort of skim on top of the water. He knows it wants to be able to dive, and it wants to be able to sort of fly a little bit. But like, how, right? And so they like built and this is in some of the behind the scenes stuff. I think there's a documentary on Disney Plus called Fire and Water, I want to say, which goes into some of this. But they built like a MacGyver version of like, they strapped all these like they bought this device, and they like sort of augmented it, and it's this device that can sort of go above water and then dive below water, and then they put a stunt performer on that who was like experienced in water sort of stuff, and then they filmed all of that stuff, and then they brought it back to Manhattan Beach Studios, which is where I was working, and we reviewed all that footage, and then Jim was like pointing out, this is what's working, this needs to we need to account for this in the design, and that informs the design, right? Like that level of like sort of scrutiny. Cause he's like, look at how, when he's grabbing on, and like, we got some footage of like them underwater and they're holding on, and it's like, look at how much it's like, when you're going a certain speed, like how much it's like pulling back their skin, like, the, just sort of the, I don't know if it's the proper term, but like the G forces underwater of like, when you're moving that fast underwater and there's nothing, there's no canopy in front of you. like, look at what it's doing to the body. Even this stunt performer who's a very like low body fat, very like a sort of muscular person, you could still see all of this pull. And that footage was then used to inform the stuff that made it into the final film of like, we used actual reference, right? Instead of just guessing. And I think that's part of why these movies take so long and are so expensive, but that's also why they look so good, right? It's like, it's based in reality.
And sorry, just to jump in, using that specific kind of like data that you had on this particular film, have you ever had anything like that on any kind of project you've worked on? Like that level of information and input and like almost like a brief from reference, but all that kind of stuff, right?
No, I don't think there's like very few people on Earth that can just like, we can be in a meeting and then Jim will go like, well, let's just get like the Cirque du Soleil, whatever performer that troupe that does the underwater Cirque du Soleil show, and then those people just show up, in the next few days, right? Like he just makes this request and then like, I don't remember if that was specifically, sure. that, but something like that, right? Like he can just get people on the phone, or someone on his behalf can get people on the phone to like make these kind of things happen. Like, let's just build a version of the Skimwing to like shoot this and like as just reference. It's not going to make it in the movie. We're not building the like, the actual creature yet, but like, just, I think there's so few people that have that level of like both cultural sway and just sort of like financial security to be able to do that. So I'm very privileged to be a part of that, just to be in that environment where we have access to that. So the short answer is no, I've never been on a project that's like that level, there's lots that I think would aspire to that if they could, but, yeah.
And in hindsight, as a designer, if you never had that input and those conversations and those requests almost, how close do you think you would have gotten with just the normal kind of process you would have used to get to these kind of final designs?
Oh, that's a good question. Like my approach probably wouldn't change that much, but there is a lot of stuff that you just guess on and right, like that you can't know. And so my approach of like doing 2D sketches or silhouette studies and then getting an approval process from my production designer and my there's a cat in frame and my production designer and my director and that process for me as like the concept artist creature designer wouldn't change that dramatically. But there was, for example, on the Skimwing, like at one point we did build that like proxy version of its back to scale based on the actor, like a 6-foot person. So it's scaled down because the Navi is 9 foot, but the actor is roughly 6 foot or whatever. And we built that, and then we go and we like have it like manufactured. And then we bring it down to the stage, and then the stunt performer who is like their sort of water surfer sort of expert, right? Like underwater stunt performer guy, like comes, and then they're like, okay, sit on this thing. Where does it feel like how would you like to sit on it if you were writing it? Where would you feel like is natural for you to grab on this creature? And then he goes, well, here. And then we mark it with a Sharpie. Well, and then now sit up, and where would you grab? Okay, back here, we mark it with a Sharpie. And then we measure that, right? And then that then goes back into my ZBrush design, right? Of like, these are where the actor says he wants the grab points to be and how he would lay on the thing. And it's like, well, when he lays down, he needs somewhere to tuck his feet under, and there's nothing on the creature. So either we got to design that in the saddle, or we got to design it anatomically on the creature. So I ended up like putting these tiny little fins, and you'll miss them if you aren't paying attention. But if you'll see them, there's these little tiny dorsal fins on the back of the Skimwing. That was so that the actor could have something to tuck his feet under when they're diving, right? So because Jim was like, well, if he doesn't have anything to tuck his feet under, based on that reference footage, we know that like once those G forces hit that character will get torn off the creature, right? And so all of this stuff sort of plays together, and that my process didn't change a lot, but it was just that level of information that I had about the design that then informs the design. And there was examples of like, I got to work pretty closely with one of the animators, our head animator. I think, yeah, Eric Reynolds. I think he's the head animator or like lead of the animation team. I'm not sure his exact title, but he and I got to work very close on several creatures of like, okay, I have like we kind of know what this creature is, rough shape. And then because I'm working in ZBrush, I'm like able to provide a model. And that's, they do like, I'll pass that off. This is before it goes to visual effects. They'll do like just a quick crappy rig on it, something that doesn't take very long. And then Eric, our animator, can take it and then he can do animation studies and then go like, okay, well, this is how I think this creature would move. We know Jim wants it to perform this particular action. In the skim wings case, it's got to sort of do like the flying fish thing on top of the water, right? Where they sort of stick their tail in the water and then and that looks really goofy on a flying fish. Like they're kind of goofy looking animals. So how do we make that cool? And that was like, some of that was discovered in the animation process. And then, so Eric is like doing these studies, just quick animations. And then we learn some things from that. And then we review that with Jim and with Dylan and Richie, who's our sort of animation lead guy. And I think he's like a producer now, but and that then informs the design. Like it's like what Eric or the animator like discovers in that process. It then gets kicked back to me as the creature designer, and I will then augment that ZBrush sculpt, based on that feedback of like, okay, well, we realize like based on Eric's sort of studies, we think we need to like scale this fin or whatever, right? Like something needs to change in the design, or we need to move this shoulder joint or whatever it is, right? Like, and that then informs me.
And was that all happening like fluidly? Was it like an organic process? Or was it sometimes like, did it feel a bit rigid because you had to like kind of get feedback on that before you could do this?
It was a bit fluid. Yeah, it was like based on need, and it was creature dependent, right? So like the creatures obviously that the actors ride or interact with, they get a lot more scrutiny. The Tolkien, which are the big whale creatures, Constantine did a lot of the early work on that, and then I sort of inherited them. There's a huge sequences where Loak, who's one of the kids, like one of the lead kids, like is like signing to Payakan, who's the lead sort of Tolkien. And so we didn't know how that was going to work, right? And so there was like all this exploration of that, and like we knew they had to communicate. And at one point, like they have two sets of fins right on their body, and at one point they were much further back, and we realized that like, well, we want Loak to be right up against Payakan's eye, right? So that when Loak is doing sign language to Payakan, the camera is framed on Payakan's eye. You can see them both in frame. And so we basically ended up moving up one of Payakan's fins so it's right next to his eye, right? And so that was like an example of like the story sort of dictating the design, or like story needs sort of dictating the design of like, I don't know if that makes, from the sort of National Geographic, Pandoran biology sort of sense, does that make sense? Probably not, but like that was a story need. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying it's super creature specific, and like it's based on need. So like the skimwing, we knew it had a rider. We knew it had these like sort of three very distinct sort of poses of like on top of the water, below the water, and then like flying above the water. And so like those were all design challenges, Payakan had the overall body shape design was one design, but then the eye, because it got so much screen time, it was like that was a separate design pass that like I took on. That was like, I have dozens of versions of Payakan's eye, and then a few dozen more of Payakan's like pattern around his eye, right? Like, so it's all based on like, because it's like we knew the camera was going to get close, and there was going to be a lot of screen time of Loak interacting with Payakan right there on the eye. That became a need. Whereas like some of the fish in the reef or something, right? Like we know those are going to be on screen for like a few seconds in the background, blurry, moving, sort of like motion blur. So it's like that doesn't get the same level of scrutiny. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but
Sure. Do you have a favorite creature for whatever reason that you worked on these films?
If you had asked me on the second film, it was the Skimwing because I got a lot of like personal influence on that. Like a lot of the designs are like they pass through multiple hands, like it's multiple designers working on them. It's a team effort. Obviously, Dylan Cole is art directing everything. Jim Cameron is like directing everything. So obviously, like they're overseeing everything. But like even in the case of Piacon, like Constantine did like the body shape, like that's sort of his design. But then I got to do a lot of the detailing, like that eye stuff, where like I detailed the body out and did all the patterning and stuff. But even with that, like I had help from Joe Pepe, who was our character designer, and Seifel Hawk, who was another concept artist. And so like everything is sort of a team effort, and which is kind of fun. Like it's cool to pass it to somebody else and then like see what they come up with in the same design problem. And then it sort of like breaks you out of your sort of normal, you know, I have certain solutions that I tend to fall back on, you know, like we all do, of like a certain shape language or whatever that are like comfort zone sort of things that I'll do in a pinch. But so it's cool to see somebody else interpret like the same problem and go like, oh, here's a totally different solution. And like, oh, well, so that sort of breaks me out of my, you know, my tried and true solutions. But so, yeah, like a lot of them are team effort stuff. But then the Skimwing I got to sort of own, like it was largely my design. Nice. And then in 3, in Fire and Ash, I got to design the Night Wraith, which is the big new sort of villain creature that Varang, who's the new villain, rides. And that was like mine from the ground up, basically. Dylan did help with the patterning, and obviously art directed. But yeah, it was, so the one, those are the 2 that I think stand out just because I got to have a bit more of like a personal sort of, you know, my thumbprints are on them a bit more than like more of a team thing, but I still like the team stuff too. Like I said, it was, you know, that stuff is, it's really fun to sort of see other people's solutions. And a lot of the stuff, it would be like some of those reef fish, like they had done sketches of them, you know, I think some of them are dated like 2014, you know, like before I started on the project. And then like it's sat on a server in a vault somewhere, you know, for like a decade. And then it comes to me and like, okay, now finish this design. And so it was like somebody at Legacy Effects or something like, you know, did some, I think it was Simon Weber did some of those initial like fish sketches. And then I like inherited those like close to a decade later, and it's like, okay, now finish them and flesh them out. So that's kind of cool. Like it's a little bit like, the Akula, which is the big sort of, the great white shark. Like Jim ended up, after that sort of initial meeting, Jim ended up falling back on a design that came out of that initial round. That Andrew Baker, who is a really amazing creature designer who worked at Weta. I don't think he's there anymore, but had done. And so in a way it was like, okay, we'll use Andrew's design as a starting point. And then I got to like continue to evolve it, continue to iterate on it. But like, it was the jumping off point. And in a way it was like, oh, I get to sort of like work with Andrew in a weird way, like not directly, but like I'm inheriting his ZBrush model and like working off of it, and like got to see his, in a way, sort of see his sort of decision making. And he's an artist that I really like, admire, and would love to have the opportunity to work with like in person, but this was the next best thing. So that stuff's always kind of cool.
And were there any creatures in particular, or even maybe like any kind of design problems that were just super challenging that took a long time either for yourself or for the whole team to kind of like really figure out?
Yeah, I mean, the big one was Piacon, or to the Tolkien, because he's in Jim's mind, he was always considered a character, not a creature, not just a creature, right? Like he's a character. He's going to have dialogue, right? Like in a weird way. And so he got as much design scrutiny as like Neytiri, right? Like, it was big, you know, Jim's big new like design for that film. So that was years. That was literal years of design by multiple people. Myself for probably on and off for several years, like doing other things as well. But like, and before me it was Constantine, and before that it was, there was a whole Blue Sky phase with Weta, Workshop, and I think Legacy. So yeah, it was like, and then I think at some point, almost everybody in the art department like slightly touched that design. Yeah. Like it got passed around. So yeah, that's the quick answer, I guess. Like,
fair enough. And specifically on like just the subject matter of creatures themselves. Do you have like kind of like a preferred almost biome, or I don't know the best way to describe this, but like kind of like environment that they come from? Like, do you have a preferred kind of like subject matter in that regard?
Not really. No, I'm a fan of it all. I mean, I really do love the sort of sci-fi, like hard science fiction, like genre. I'm totally happy like where I'm at. Like this is totally like, if I could sort of make up a dream project in my head, it would be something like this. If this never existed, right? Like, nice. Just in a vacuum. But then there's also a part of me that's like, okay, thinking about what's next, it would be cool to explore something that's like fantasy, something totally where the rules are totally different, right? Of like, you don't rationalize things. The logic doesn't come from, biology of like, it has to make sense within an ecosystem, or like the sort of science fiction rules that you've established for your world. The rationalization comes from mythology, or like sort of culture of like, things existing in this, universe for this reason. Like you look at Game of Thrones or something, and it's like there's all this mythology built around the dragons, right? And it would be cool to work on something in that sort of vein at some point. I'm a big fan of Guillermo del Toro's films, something like that would be cool. Like, but that is totally like, in terms of just sort of creature design ethos, it's totally in a way sort of opposite of James Cameron, right? Like James Cameron is very hard science fiction, and Del Toro is very hard sort of fantasy mythology. So it'd be cool to explore that. I guess it'd be a little intimidating or scary at this point to sort of jump in the other end, but it would be fun.
A couple of questions from me before we head off. We haven't so we've spoken about your professional career. What about on the personal side? Even if it's not just through art stuff, maybe it's something else completely unrelated to art. Do you have like kind of like a need or a purpose with your personal stuff as a creative? And do you have anything cooking in that regard?
I guess, yeah. Can you expand on the question a little bit? I'm not sure I totally follow.
Like, I guess it's just simpler way to ask you, like, what about your personal work? Like, do you have any personal projects, in the fires?
I get asked that. I don't, not really. I feel very sort of creatively fulfilled at work at this point. Nice. And so I think a lot of my energy goes into that. Like I said, like in a vacuum, I would be working on if I were doing a personal project, it would be a project very much like this. Like even if I had never worked here. So for now, I think I'm pretty okay in that regard. I think I do enjoy having like a little bit of a life outside of work. So, spending time with my family and stuff. So I think that's where my energy goes, and like I said, I try and take care of myself, like both sort of physically and mentally. And so there's like some effort that goes into that, in my personal life, that, like I sort of touched on, like sort of the fitness stuff, and then even like the mental health stuff, like therapy and stuff, like that takes effort and that takes sort of dedication and time. So I try and make time for that stuff too. Because I want to do this for a long time. Right. Yes. Like, I have seen people burn out, and, I have seen people sort of not take care of themselves physically and mentally, and that can really affect them. So like in a way, it's almost like I need to like even if it's a little bit, I need to put a little bit of money in the piggy bank every day of like my personal health and personal well-being, so that I know that I have that like savings built up over time, right? That I can cash in later.
And
I don't know if that makes sense.
No, totally. It's a journey that I'm definitely on and trying to like get to a good place with. I have flashes with it when it's like everything's super like in harmony and perfect resonance with each other. And then like right now is completely clashing and a lot of chaos. And sometimes it's like when you kind of had it and then you fall off, it's almost more annoying trying to get back to there because you kind of know what to do rather than when it's kind of like, oh, let's see where this kind of goes. But I totally get you 1,000,000%, and I recommend it for everybody. I had a friend who told me this was a good analogy that stuck with me. A friend who's a little bit older than me, and I think we're going through what you're describing of just like everything feels like I can't keep up with it, and like I'm dropping the ball on something, and he was like, well, the way I like to look at life or think about life is like it's sort of like juggling, or you're like spinning a bunch of different plates, like you've seen the spinning plates, like you got to spin different plates, and one plate is family and one plate is health and one plate is work and etc. Right. And at some points in life, you are spinning one plate a lot faster, and then at other points that plate may slow down, but you just got to make sure they all stay spinning and you don't drop one. So it doesn't shatter, Nope. Perfectly put, man.
Yeah. And that stuck with me. So it was like at certain points I have my personal life, several years ago I got married, and like we had like a whole bunch of effort that went into planning a wedding. And like, so, that plate is spinning a lot faster. That's taking up a lot more of my attention at that time. Right. And then, so maybe like my professional life is like, I'm doing well enough, but I'm not giving it that 110%, because that's going into the wedding planning or whatever. Right. Or my workout or whatever is like, I'm doing well enough to maintain, but I'm not like going to be training for a half marathon or whatever at that time. So it's just like, it's putting different things in sort of focus or in priority at different times, different stages of life. And I think there are different chapters to life too.
For sure.
That sometimes certain things are much higher priority. Sounds like you've got a young family, and so that's, I'm sure, taking up a tremendous amount of time, and so you probably don't have as much time for other things. And I'm sort of entering into that phase of life too, and so I'm sure it's going to shake things up.
Oh, it will for sure. Even if you try your best not to, like, it will find a way. But nevertheless, it's still a great adventure anyway. Do you find like you have a good grasp on that balance for yourself? Like you said, like it was great that we explained it as well. Like the working out or looking after yourself just feeds back into the art because it keeps you sharp, and almost vice versa as well. So do you feel like you got a nice kind of like rhythm with that kind of stuff?
I hope that I've made it clear in this conversation that I by no means have everything figured out. Of course, fair enough. Like, yes. Yeah, like I think I talk to. It's funny that I talk to like students or like young professionals, and they're like, I'll be in a portfolio review with me and like a couple other like pretty established artists, and they're like, oh, I can't believe you're talking to us. Like, I can't believe you're here. Like, I'll go to a school or whatever. I can't believe you're here. And I'm like, I'm just a guy, right? Like, and these other guys are just guys, and they're just like, a lot of them are dads or moms or whatever, right? And like we're just people, and we're all struggling with the same things. And so the short answer to your question is I don't have everything figured out. And so there's plenty of times in life where I'm struggling, and just I guess just because I've been sort of fortunate enough and privileged enough to work with James Cameron doesn't mean that, that I have everything in order in my life.
Fair enough. I think that's a bit of philosophy and lesson unto itself as well. Like, like what might appear on paper as like figured out is not always the case. And I think the fact that you share that as well, like I think that's actually quite powerful unto itself as well, because just even mentioning that to people, like it kind of dispels maybe a lot of the myths about what a career is and what in fact you should actually focus on.
Yeah. And I think that I hope so. I think that's what I'm trying to relay, right? Is that like, it's always, I still go through moments of, even though I have this big project under my belt of like thinking about what's next and like having sort of anxiety and fear around that, right? Of like, at some point this is going to end and I don't know what's next and I don't know where my career goes from here. And there's sort of just a built-in anxiety to that, right? And I think, but if I were to talk to a student or somebody who's just at the beginning of their career and like, oh, they would just assume that like, oh, you worked on Avatar, you're set, right? Like you're, you know, you worked with James Cameron and like, so you're, you know, you've got it all figured out. And like, no, not at all. Like, and so I think I hope that that's helpful in some way to somebody who's maybe at a different stage in their sort of artistic career than me, that like, just to know that maybe it's not, maybe it's like, oh, you know, it's always scary, but, I hope that that's helpful, that it's just like, you know, life is constantly changing and you figure it out as you go, you know. I don't know.
No, I think that's for sure. Like over the years of doing this, like that kind of advice and those kind of anecdotes, that is absolute gold in my opinion. Like those, because it's honest and you're saying it based on your own experiences as opposed to almost giving this kind of like manual of like how to be. Like you're just saying this is how it is. And I think that whether people need to recognize that initially or maybe later on in their career, that'll definitely stink in there for sure. Final question before we head off, and you definitely kind of answered it a little bit just here as well. Any final thoughts or words from yourself to the listeners, or even to your younger self?
Ooh. I think there is a lot of, we didn't touch on it, but there's obviously like a lot of anxiety in our field right now around AI and around just sort of industry shifts. And I think it is okay to be anxious about that stuff. I am anxious about that stuff. I don't know what the answers are. I do believe that there will be a place for talented designers, sort of regardless of technology shifts, industry shifts. I think if you are a hardworking person with a good portfolio who can problem solve, who can work well with other people, you will find a place. And that there is a place for you. So I hope that's helpful to somebody out there. It's not an easy time to be especially someone sort of coming out of at the beginning of their career. Like it's really scary, and it's scary for even like very seasoned professionals right now. But I think that yeah, like I said, if you can problem solve, if you can like solve design challenges, I think there will always be a need for that. It's almost like in some ways the AI of it all, the AI factor, like in some ways that everybody now, including the director or the producer or the PA, you know, the assistant, is able to produce now very finished looking images, very flashy, you know, sort of polished looking images. So it's almost like design and thinking through the problem becomes even more important and even more of like a premium. So the person that can like apply reasoning and thought into their decisions, as long as the client is able to recognize that, I think that person becomes even more valuable now. Yeah, so I hope that's helpful to somebody out there. Yeah, it's okay to be scared right now about it all, but I think that it's going to be all right if you're talented and driven and a good sort of problem solver.
Perfect. Zach, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for jumping on.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate your time. Thanks for having me.
Massive thanks to Zach for jumping on and for an incredible conversation. Hit the links attached to this episode to see what he's up to and to give him a follow. Then when you're done, head to learnsquare.com and take your creativity to the next level with our game-changing courses. I've been your host, Aaron Danda. Till next time.